Zerepledor and Nosnev. Nosnev separated the flow of the great river to the south and to the southeast. Outside its southernmost edges laid the land of the Mouths, Zerepledor. The Mouths and the tribal Vamouths were peaceful neighbors who traded with one another at the border of their respective lands. Every 20 days they met to exchange their goods. Mouths made good carvings, furniture, and fine wine, while the Vamouths received these for their berries, cherries, animal skins, wild ducks and edible leaves. The trade usually lasted for half a day, starting at sunrise and ending at mid-afternoon. After each trade they celebrated together by dancing, cheering, and playing their respective music while grilled fish, ducks, turkey, nuts and wines are served. Just before sunset they hugged and bade goodbye to each other as they went back to their respective villages. Nosnev and Zerepledor were turning dark each end of trade, but the lights from their torches and their singing as they walked back to their respective villages provided life after sunset from the lines of flickering lights that were moving to the north and the other lines of lights that were moving to the south. With their skills in carpentry, Mouths visited the villages of the Vamouths on their request and stayed there for days. They helped the Vamouths build their houses on top of the trees and on the banks of their river in their northeast. The Vamouths were small kinds, only half the size of the Mouths. Mouths could build several houses for them in a day. Despite their size, Vamouths were good at hunting and use of forest plants and trees in making medicines and different kinds of poisons. They used long thin hollow woods for their darts and slingshots loaded with special compounds that could make an animal or any life sleep, paralyzed or die depending on the poison ingredients. It took 4 days to reach the southern villages of the Vamouths where Ziv, the Vamouths chief, resided. Ziv was a long-time friend of Pachen, the Mouths' elder, who together shared the same passion writing diaries and histories. Both believed that it was the only legacy that they could leave for the next generation. Since time their ancestral leaders were good friends who enjoyed peaceful coexistence, though both practiced different religions, laws and traditions that each treated with great respect. On one occasion after the end of trading, the festive activity and the free-flowing wine made Wikov, a Vamouth trader, drunk and lose control. He was becoming overly funny and flamboyant. At first his fellow Vamouths and the Mouths enjoyed his usual stories until he began to get rough and challenged everyone for a fight. The Mouths and the Vamouths tried to pacify him, and when Porov, another Vamouth, came to meddle, Wikov accidentally hit Porov in the face with his elbow when Porov held his arm. Wikov laughed seeing Porov fell on the ground. Porov became angry and embarrassed. He responded by hitting Wikov with his dart, forgetting that it was loaded with a fatal poison. All he intended to do was to make Wikov sleep, but instead he saw Wikov fell, mouth frothing with saliva as his body shook vigorously. The dart's poison reacted quickly and Wikov was dead in a matter of minutes. The festive activity turned bad and the Mouths and the Vamouths witnessed this in shock. Porov was stunned himself and retreated to the forest, leaving the bewildered Vamouths and Mouths. The Vamouths carried Wikov's body to Nosnev and told Ziv of what had happened, and Ziv, a fair chief, listened as he demanded Porov to stand before him. Porov was in grief and sorry for what happened to his friend as he faced Ziv and the enraged family of Wikov. Among those who Ziv called to bear witness was Pachen, who, together with 2 Mouths, spoke what they saw that confirmed the story of the Vamouths. Ziv sentenced Porov based on their laws and the punishment was ordered. It was death by hanging for Porov. Pachen tried to appeal for Porov, but Ziv ignored him and instead reminded him that he was just a visitor. It was the law of the Vamouths that anyone who took a life should pay it with his own life. Porov was hanged in the middle of the village. The death of Porov angered his brothers and relatives, who turned their hate to Pachen and his 2 companions. They thought that hadn't the Mouths offered wine or did something at the trade, Wikov may have been alive, and so was Porov. They left in grief and vengeance in their hearts. On their way back to Zerepledor, Porov's brother Hiavi, together with a few Vamouths, murdered Pachen and the 2 Mouths with him. Their bodies were hidden and buried inside a deep cave in Nosnev. When Pachen and the Mouths did not return after 5 days, Kus, another Mouth elder, and 3 of his kind went to Nosnev, but like Pachen, they suffered the same fate at the hands of Hiavi. They never reached Ziv. The Mouths' bodies were buried in the same deep cave where Pachen and his 2 companions were likewise hidden beneath its soils. 10 days passed and none of the Mouths who ventured inside Nosnev returned. This alarmed the elder Mouths and advised the others to stay away from Nosnev until Pachen, Kus, or any of the Mouths with them returned. The day for trading came, and as usual, cheerful Vamouths were in the boundary of both lands together with their usual products in the carriages pulled by Naktnus, 6-legged large black hairy beasts with tusks that widely curl down from its head towards the end of their snout nose, crossing upwards and bending back toward their wide and red eyes, resting its curl in the middle of its forehead. Its wide and firm body resembled that of an elephant as well as its front legs, while its hind and middle legs resembled that of a horse, but only larger and muscular. Naktnus were vegetative animals present in the wilds, and Vamouths were good at taming them. Mouths had been waiting for the Vamouths and excited not about the trade but in the hope that the Mouths would be with the traders. Their hopes faded seeing the last of the Vamouths came out from the forest without the Mouths. The Mouths asked the Vamouths if they had seen Pachen, Kus and the others, but their questions were just met by bewilderment, for the Vamouths were equally surprised to learn that the Mouths failed to return. Yes, they had seen them leave their village, but they were shocked to learn that they had not reached Zerepledor. The trade took place in an unusual way. It was like pure business, for many Mouths were quiet as they loaded the carriages with barrels of wine while receiving the carts full of fruits and vegetables. The Vamouths knew that there would be no celebration seeing the sad faces of the Mouths. The trade finished very early and many Mouths had already left until Al, another Mal elder, approached Zos, the leader of the Vamouth traders. It is our custom to find our lost brothers, and until we know what happened to them we cannot be in festive moods. Something must have happened to them inside your forest. We apologize that we could not feast with you today until we know that Pachen, Kus and the others are safe. We will go with you to Zav and seek his help to find our brothers. If after 8 days they have not come back, we will need to mourn for them in our traditions. Zos understood Al, and together they traveled back to Nosnev. After days of traveling with the Vamouths, Al and about 30 Mouths were on the doorsteps of Zav, who himself was surprised seeing their sad looks. It was already late in the night. He knew that something bad happened seeing the Mouths in the late hour and in their tired and sad state, but did not expect that it was because his friend Pachen and the others were missing. Al also told him of Kus, and this silenced Zav. He listened to every word Al had spoken. Zav promised Al that they would find Pachen and the others no matter what. Zav led the Mouths to their rooms to rest for the night. The disappearance of the Mouths in Nosnev traveled to every Vamouth homes, and many offered their help to join the search. Inside his room, Zav was thinking of past events before the Mouths' disappearance, and he shivered at the thought that Pachen and the others might have fallen victims to vengeance, a customary Vamouth trait. Mouths had gone up early the next day. As each left the doors of their rooms and gathered together outside, they saw Zav speaking with several Vamouths wearing war clothes. Shields covered their bodies as they stood in line. Among them were the Vamouths who volunteered to join the search that included Hiavi and his companions. They would ensure that the Mouths would not be found. Altogether the Vamouth searchers were close to 300. When Zav saw the Mouths he approached them. "We will find Pachen. He is like a brother to me. Our warriors will join us in case there is a need to fight. Whoever or whatever took or harmed Pachen and the others must pay for their deed." Al and the Mouths felt Zav's concerns, and their respect for him grew much more. Together Vamouths and Mouths searched Nosnev. They followed the usual path leading to Zerepledor, and when they reached the inner forest, Zav ordered the Vamouths to break the line and instructed half of them to move east and the other half to the west while they walked together southwards. The inner forest of Nosnev was not at all friendly. It was dark and filled with beasts like bears, anacondas, and wolves in the night. There were also poisonous plants and thorns that scattered on its soils and trees. It was very difficult to follow the tracks of anyone, for the wet and muddy soils hid them, and the usual waters that fell from the high trees made some tracks disappear within hours. Further, a Mouth's track was difficult to find, for they sometimes used the trees to move that even the Vamouths who were good hunters could not follow their trails. Night came and Nosnev was filled with little torches. The beasts of the night could be heard, wolves, but this was nothing to the Vamouths who were accustomed to forest beasts. They did not think that Pachen and the others fell victims to them, for they knew that when Mouths were approached by darkness in their woods they just climbed the trees to spend the night. Not a single Mouth had ever become a victim of any forest beasts, and they discounted this possibility until they heard that 2 groups of Mouths were lost in their forest. Inside their minds the beasts had moved from their usual hunting grounds and the Mouths fell victims to them. However, the safe journey of the Vamouth traders back at Nosnev did not fit the possibility. They continued their search the next day and still found nothing. On the 3rd day, they were almost halfway to Zerepledor when a Vamouth saw tracks heading southwards. They followed it until it ended on a bushy place where another Vamouth saw a piece of a flat stone lying on the ground with a hole in the middle. It was part of Pachen's bracelet. Zav studied the ground and the immediate surroundings as he ordered the Vamouths to scatter around the perimeter to search the area. It was turning dark, but the Vamouths were not giving up, hoping that the tracks would lead them to something. The Mouths were equally patient, hoping that they would find their kind, until another Vamouth from afar signaled that he had found another sets of tracks. This time the tracks were heading north, and those were the tracks of Kus and the Mouths with him. The searchers gathered around the tracks and combed its perimeter until dawn. They searched and searched tirelessly, but the Mouths were nowhere to be found until Zav, seeing the restless and tired Vamouths and Mouths, ordered them to rest until the sun comes. He intended to continue their search as soon as the woods became bright enough. Zav sadly told Al that Pachen and the others must have met something that made them disappear. Deep inside, Zav knew that some Vamouths were responsible for their disappearance, seeing a few Vamouth tracks with them. Years of experience made Zav conclude that Pachen and the others suffered a tragic fate, a fate born out of hate and vengeance, as he looked at the direction where Hiavi was resting with the others. His instincts were telling him something against Hiavi, and the thought of it made him close his fist. While leaning and resting his body on a fallen log, rain fell and his tired eyes drooped and he fell asleep. Daylight was passing through the woods, fog was everywhere, and it was already the 4th day of their search. Zav made an uncanny order to the Vamouths that bewildered the Mouths. He wanted the Vamouths searching the east to change places with the Vamouths searching in the west. He secretly watched Hiyavi's reaction and body language on his order, but he found nothing unusual. It was because they already passed the cave where Hiyavi and his cohorts buried the Mouths. They told the others that there was nothing inside it. The searchers were already nearing the edges of Nosnev to the boundary of the Mouths. They failed to find them. Al and the Mouths were already resigned to the fate of Pachen and told Zav to give up the search. Zav insisted to go back one last time and do another search, but Al advised him that it was over and just thanked him for his deed. It was already the 28th day since Pachen and his Mal companions disappeared, and in the Mal's traditions, they considered Pachen, Kus and the Mals with them as dead. Mals let nature and the universe to take care of their lives and souls, that Al explained to Zav, who just bowed his head and respected their faith. Al instead invited the searchers to Zerepledor to pay their last respects for Pachen and the others in the Mal's traditional ways. Zav watched the sad faces of the Mals as they lined up in the perimeter of the lake carrying a leaf that they threw into the waters while the belongings of the lost were buried in the ground. Music for lamentation filled the woods as the Mals sang the song for the lost in their ancient language. The moment made Zav weep, and he promised to himself that he would avenge the death of the Mals and the friend he loved like a brother, Pachen.